Well, Molly, that was quite the start to the afternoon, wasn't it? Why don't you give the listeners a bit of a lowdown on what we've just had announced from Air Products?
Yeah, of course. Well, Air Products this afternoon has announced that it's abandoning its planned 1,700 tonne per day blue hydrogen project in Louisiana, which will result in a 2.9 billion write-down, which will impact its third quarter results. So yeah, huge news for the industrial gas major today, and something that comes as a shock to a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've been covering this story for over a year now. You know, it was towards the end of Sefi Kasemi's time as CEO that we maybe started to see the cracks appear with this project. You know, it was due online this year, originally given a capex price of about $4.5 billion. And here we are today with it all ending in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the first project that has been axed by Air Products under the new leadership. But as you say, this one, you know, there's been different plans for this one. It's been scaled back. They've been looking for new off-takers. So this one perhaps had a bit more hope than those that have been cancelled before. So it's a bit of a shock, but as I say, it's not the first project by Air Products to go, but one we've been following closely, and I think you'll agree, not what we're expecting to hear today.
Yeah, I think in so many ways it's unexpected. It's a bit of a shock, but this was totally in the realms of possibility. You know, it was what Eduardo Menezes was kind of installed to be doing. It was to steady the ship again and take Air Products away from these high capital, potentially low return projects. And I think it's perhaps unsurprising because of some of the really positive messaging that we've been getting over the past year, you know, that if you're going to be doing a blue hydrogen, blue ammonia project, the US Gulf Coast is the place to be doing it. Low cost natural gas, and the geology to be doing your carbon capture and storage. So let's dive into some of the reasons that we can see so far as to why this might have been scrapped. In December, we hear that Air Products was in advanced negotiations with Yara, which could have seen the fertilizer company take on the downstream ammonia elements of the Louisiana project. What have the company statements revealed so far?
So Yara said today that it's not going to proceed with the acquisition of ammonia assets at the project, and that it will instead redirect capital to other US ammonia investments that offer stronger returns. Air Products itself also said that the move was based on expected financial returns not meeting its return criteria. So I think, much like what you alluded to earlier, for Air Products, it's, you know, meeting those strong targets that its new leadership wants. It wants to get back into that core IG model. It wants to make sure that everything is in place and there's going to be that offtake secured before these projects come online. So I think it all feeds into that, really.
Yeah, definitely. I think that had really been the key message in the last few investor calls that we've been sitting in on was, yes, this project still has legs. Yes, it could still make sense, but we are not doing it without a long-term offtake agreement in place. And again, if we cast our eyes back to before February when Menezes became CEO, what were some of the investor discussions around this? Why was it perhaps criticised so much by investors?
Well, I think firstly, the scale of the project. But, you know, as you said, blue hydrogen, especially in the US Gulf Coast, I think that's proven to be, you know, one of the most successful routes for hydrogen. But this project was so huge. And there wasn't many details that had been confirmed. You know, there was that initial announcement, which, I mean, I can't remember when it was off the top of my head, but, you
Must
know.
have been the early 2020s.
2021, 22, I want to say. Yeah. And things went quite quiet. And then this new leadership came in and it really put a microscope on all of the projects that had been announced by Air Products. Obviously, this one had one of the largest capital ties to it. But once you really start drilling down into all of the elements, there was a lot of question marks, a lot of what ifs. And as you said, the prices were more than doubling. It was getting so expensive. And then there were talks of scaling back. But, as you and I know, when you scale back a project, there's still a capital attachment to that. So there wasn't really an easy path. I think, the Yara deal perhaps offered a lifeline. But 6 months on, obviously that hasn't come through. And how long do you leave a project, in that limbo? So I guess from Air Products' point of view, maybe they had to make that call.
Yeah, and I think one of the most interesting kind of dynamics around this is for the past couple of months with the Iran crisis, we've been hearing that potentially we need to diversify our ammonia supplies. The plan would have been that Yara would have handled the downstream distribution of this. And with it being a European-based player, the EU now has its carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is essentially a carbon price on imported products, which do cover fertilizers, including ammonia. So it's really interesting what Yara would have seen in the economics that just wasn't making sense for them. And I wonder if over the next couple of months, as we start having some of those earnings calls, that we'll start to have some of those things revealed to us. But right now, I guess we're just left with a bit of a shock, and looking ahead to the next element, which I think a huge number of investors are going to be looking towards, which is, of course, the other side of this deal that was being negotiated regarding green ammonia volumes from the 2.2 gigawatt NEOM green hydrogen project in Saudi Arabia. So again, just to bring any listeners up to speed, at the time of announcing the potential Louisiana deal, Yara said that they could offtake the green ammonia produced in Saudi and sell it within its network. The key here for Air Products, this is a major de-risking move. That plant, which will be the biggest in the world of its kind, is due to start next year. Air Products today only has committed hydrogen offtake agreements from 2030, which is only for around 45% of the plant. And having signed a 30-year exclusive take-or-pay offtake agreement, it really needs a deal to kind of eliminate any of that risk associated with it. So again, Molly, you would have been here at Gasworld when that project was first announced. It's been quite the journey for that as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you're completely right. That's where investors and, even those that aren't investors, just follow Air Products. That's where their heads are going to turn now. This is the fourth major project that Air Products has axed. So everyone's going to be looking at NEOM. It was a similar situation where it was announced, obviously a huge project. And I think now people are starting to hyper-focus on the little details. And, it's Air Products' third quarter results next month, 30th of July, I believe. And I think, if I was them, I'd be preparing for lots of questions about the Louisiana complex, but also about NEOM. People are going to want to know, is this still going to go forward? Is this going to be further stripped back? What do those deals look like? And I think, investors, after seeing the way things have gone for Air Products in the past year or so, or, year and a half or so, there's going to be those questions. And I think hopefully we'll get some more clarity on that project. But, we haven't heard too much coming out about NEOM recently.
No. I mean, we know that it is supposedly 90% complete. Surely we're at that stage where there's no backing away from getting this thing online, but it is really quite telling about what the first few years of operations could look like.
Yeah, no, definitely. But as I said, we haven't heard anything from Air Products recently. But I think next month, as I said, lots of questions will be, looking towards that project as the financial results come out. So I think that's something that we'll have to definitely keep an eye on. But yeah, it's definitely been a turbulent time for Air Products and its, large scale projects. And unfortunately, because of the way things have panned out for them, they are really under the microscope. Everyone is looking at what their next move will be. So lots of questions from us, but obviously if we've got questions, I'm sure everyone else will too. So we'll just have to keep a close eye.
Yeah, and naturally we'll be following any development that we see on this, and you'll be able to find all of those updates and analysis on the gasworld.com website.